Back again, episode number 2, written on the pitch with the star of the show, Jessica Charman. What's going on, Jess?
Not much, Jason. Glad to be here. Excited for episode number 2, and thank you everyone for their positive feedback. We're excited to have this show and answer lots of questions and see what everyone thinks about the game.
Yeah, you threw it out there for questions and pretty much saved me time prepping, coming up with questions for you. Everybody else did. So, hey, I love it. That's great. I do have one for you, though, to kick things off. The SheBelieves Cup starts this week. It's kind of a weird one because we know what the U.S. has. We know what they're working towards. We don't really know what Canada has with a bunch of players who are now unavailable. Argentina's replaced Japan, and Argentina is trying to get to this level. And Brazil is kind of trying to rebuild. So I don't know what to expect. What are you looking for out of this tournament?
I think that's exactly it, Jason. It's probably one of the most unpredictable tournaments. We're going into it blind. With the World Cup, the Women's World Cup, we kind of knew what to expect from a lot of the big teams. Here, it's completely flipped on its head. And with that replacement with Japan, we usually know a lot about them. They have a very predictable style of play. You're throwing in Argentina instead, who are literally the opposite of that. It's a team that we don't know too much about. We know there's a lot of young players. We know it's an exciting time for the female game in South America as a whole. So that's going to be very interesting. I would expect, if we're honest here, Jason, that we might see some very comfortable U.S. women's national team results. So therefore, maybe we're getting to see some depth in the roster. Maybe we're seeing some rotations. Maybe we're seeing some younger players, new faces come in to that U.S. national team roster. And perhaps that's how they use this tournament. Instead of being a battle like we've seen in a lot of SheBelieves Cups tournaments in the past, where there have been more potentially established nations and teams that have had more game time under their belt. With COVID, you've got a lot of players that might not have played a lot of soccer in recent times. I think this one might be a very interesting period of games for the US to sort of develop their squad further and see what they have on the bench and see what depth they have.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see if Latko Andonovski tries to play certain players or certain positional groups together to get a sense of some of that chemistry that, you know, the U.S. is coming off of back-to-back World Cup titles, so it's not like you're in a bad place here, but it is a new manager. It is a situation where you do have a few players who are on maybe the last tournament of their career with the Olympics coming up later this year. You want to win that, but you also got to start to think down the road as to what's next. So maybe you see some of the younger players mixed in and how they mix with other players, like what the chemistry looks like, I guess is what I'm looking for.
100%. And it'll be an interesting time. That's where you can test that chemistry. You can take the risk because honestly, SheBelieves Cup, it's a tournament. It's fun to watch. I've watched it before myself in Nashville, but it's a nothing tournament when you compare it to the Olympic Games, when you compare it to a World Cup. Those are going to be the priorities. So this might be the time now to experiment a little bit, to play some different players. And it'll be interesting to see the fitness of these players because some of them haven't played for a while. You've got all the players that are on loan or play for English teams that have had a lot of regular soccer, but others of them haven't played that much lately.
You've got a wide range, like you said, of ages and groups, and it'll be interesting to see how it looks. I'm looking forward to seeing Argentina. I want to see if they can compete. I want to see how they look maybe the beginning of Game 1 to the end of Game 3, if we see some growth out of them. I guess Canada, we're not really going to learn very much because they're missing so many important players that are not going to be part of this team, which was a very recent announcement. And Brazil, you know, it's just what's the next generation look like? Pia Sundhage is gonna stay in the job for a little bit longer, which I think is really good for that program. But can Brazil get back to being a World Cup contender? Do we see any glimpse of that here? I don't know.
And that's what's exciting about it. It's going to be one of those tournaments that we know far more at the end than we do now. And we're going to start those games. They're coming up soon this week.
Can't wait for that. Thursday is when the tournament starts. When we get back together next week, we'll kind of have a couple of games to parse through, see what jumps out to you, and we'll be preparing for the last game of the tournament, so we'll kind of know where things stand. I mean, am I crazy to say that if the U.S. does not win all 3 games, that's a disappointment?
No, not at all. If they don't win all 3 games, something has gone horribly wrong. They've got to be the guaranteed favorites. But let's hope the games are closer than on the outside we might think right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for, too. The Fox family of networks will have all of the games, even the ones not involving the U.S. Looking forward to watching those, and Brazil and Argentina kick things off on Thursday. We got a bunch of questions from listeners, and they're not completely all over the place, so I'm going to try to group them together a little bit. The first one is from Jorge El Mataflo, and he asks about your hashtag GK Union experience and wants to know your favorite drills or warm-up exercises before games as a goalkeeper.
Okay, so that one was easy. I was excited to read that one. My favorite warm-up exercise was always a cross delivery and then a shot from the outside of the 18. What I like about that is it gets your hands warm for more match realistic things. A lot of the time you'll see early on in a goalkeeper warm-up, it's very predictable stuff. It's dives where you know where the ball is going. It's quick feet where you know where the ball is going. The most important part of a warm-up for a goalkeeper's sharpness is that unpredictable stuff that gets your reactions going. So I would love one of my wingers to run down the line, put in a cross, for me to come claim, to get my hands ready, to get that dominance ready in the 6-yard box, and then drop that ball instantly and get a shot from outside the 18. And honestly, it was a nice time to get a few worldy saves. And what my teammates didn't like as they were lining up ready to take shots is if I ended on a great save that I felt good about, if I had a clean cross followed by a great save, I would take my break. I'd be like, okay, I'm done. I'm ready to play, because that's the mentality a goalkeeper needs. They need to do something real clean and real good as their last bit of action before they get into that game.
How much did you, and I know things have kind of changed, and I think they're still evolving in what we're starting to see managers expect out of goalkeepers. How much work did you do like a field player would, where you're warming up, with some possession work, with some passing work? Was that a big part of it as you were coming up? Are you starting to see that more and more now?
I think you're seeing it more now, but it was 100% a big part of the game. I didn't start my freshman year, and my coach told me the reason I wasn't starting was because I wasn't as confident with my feet as the other goalkeeper. He sent me off. He told me, hey, there's some indoor leagues around. Go play in those. Get ready. Play on the pitch. Get your feet ready. And honestly, that was the best decision I ever made, because having those small touches, being confident with the ball at your feet, it is so much more important. As I was growing up, the thing the coaches liked to see the most was that you could knock a ball to the halfway line on the rolling ball. They didn't care if you could take it with your left or ping to the touch line, stuff like that. So at Clayton State, my warm-ups, we would have a lot of time where the coach had a very specific way of wanting to play, kind of similar to the Brad Guzan, pinging to the wings. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of that going on, and then some quick player work. We avoided going in for the possession games in pre-game with the other team just because of risk of injury.
Right.
But when it came to practices, 5v2, stuff like that, that was something the goalkeeper had to always participate in. And I'm glad I did, because, again, that quick touch under pressure, it is so important that you're comfortable doing it, but not too comfortable, Jason, not too comfortable.
Well, somebody who hasn't been too comfortable lately, and I'm glad you mentioned confidence, because that's where I feel like it is, Alisson and Liverpool. And it's been, I think, both. It's not just been his work with the ball at his feet. We've seen that pop up and hurt the team, but we've also seen just bad decision making. Is it something technical with him? Is it just a confidence issue? Is it the players that he's missing around him? Are you seeing anything specific here?
I think it's a combination of all three, Jason. I think a lot of it is mental. You can tell a lot, and as a goalkeeper, you hate it. After every single goal, when that camera pans to the goalkeeper and you see their facial expressions after they've made an error, and you can just see everything going through his head of frustration, of disappointment, of nerves. I think there's a big mental component. I don't think it's technical. Let's be honest here. Alisson is still one of the best goalkeepers in the league right now, 100%. He's still a quality goalkeeper, but he is making errors that at some point are going to become unforgivable if they keep popping up. I think we have to give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt when you look at how much the Liverpool back line has changed. There's a lot of time we're very forgiving as football fans when it comes to when midfielders and forwards change, or when a forward partnering changes. We always talk about players not being on the same wavelength, and we talk about, well, they're just one step off each other's pace, or that was the right idea. When it comes to a goalkeeper and their defensive line, we're a lot quicker to get on their back. We're a lot quicker to be like, well, that was bad. And I think when you look at the mistake this week with Allison, and he comes out of his box and he clatters, and he doesn't get anywhere near there. It's because he doesn't have a trust in his back line. It's because he's had different personnel in front of him. They haven't had time to gel as a back line. They lost Van Dijk. They lost a lot of players that he probably felt comfortable with playing around, and that has a huge impact. And I don't think we can underestimate the importance of stability in a back line. And perhaps one thing that Alisson is lacking is a vocal presence. And we've heard Klopp talk about that before, that he's not the most vocal goalkeeper. And when you have transitions and differences in defense, that's when a goalkeeper really needs to use their voice. So I wonder what kind of a amount that plays in it.
Yeah, that's a great point, because it's one thing when you have your normal backline in front of you and you're not very vocal. They know that, and they pick up the slack, and somebody else might be doing a lot of the yelling and organizing. But when you don't have that and you have new guys coming in, or it's, as Liverpool's case, it's been, a rotating cast of characters, they're not used to playing with a goalkeeper who's maybe quieter. So that ball that he comes flying out for, did he say anything? Do we know? I mean, it's very, very difficult. Like those changes to a lineup, they can affect any group, but do they maybe affect goalkeepers more than most?
Yeah, I would say so, because the chemistry between a goalkeeper and particularly their centre-backs, I would say is the most important relationship on the entire pitch. And you get a centre-back, if you play consistently with them, your centre-back already knows when a ball's going in, whether you're comfortable getting it. Your centre-back already knows, okay, you know what, I'm going to step out of this one because I know that my goalkeeper's coming over me to claim this. Now, if you don't have a player that you've trained with very often, we don't know how the training protocols are going on right now, whether there is difference in how much contact, how much close training is going on, things like that. You have to wonder whether they're on the same page. And like you say, Jason, I wouldn't say, based on the reaction of the players, I don't think he was very vocal in coming for that one at the weekend. And That's what happens when you get used to, perhaps he's used to players that kind of get out the way. They know he's coming for that one. Well, if you haven't played with him very often, then you don't know that.
That's what it looked like to me. It looked like the defenders turned around like, why were you here? What are you doing here? What happened? It looked like total confusion. One other big mistake on the weekend in the Arsenal-Leeds game, and this is something that carries over into the Atlanta United conversation here in a minute.
Yes.
You're going to have goalkeepers in teams that play in this way who are going to have to play a lot of times as a sweeper. Like, it's not even the sweeper-keeper idea. It's playing as a sweeper. It's playing as a field player, because you're going to play such a high line, and then you're going to have to build out of the back, and you're going to have to be able to play, like you mentioned. Like, goalkeepers have to be able to play like a field player. We saw the mistake that Leeds goalkeeper Meslier made. This is going to come up more and more and more, because it's such a boost to a team to be able to get another number forward and to be able to put higher pressure on and play in the other team's half. But when you do that, and that line is at midfield, it's inviting the opposition to play it long. And then you got to play. Is this something that you worry about a little bit, which is where the game is and where the development is? And we can talk about all of Atlanta United's goalkeepers, because Atlanta United 2 is going to play in a very similar way. You've got Ben Lundgaard, you've got Vicente Reyes, you've got Alec Can, you've got Brad Kazan. Atlanta's been an aggressive team, but maybe not to that degree. And Gabriel Heinze's teams have generally played in that way. Is this something that you think is going to take a lot of work in preseason?
Yeah, without a doubt, yeah. And I think that's the issue you have. A lot of times you try and fit a puzzle piece in, and there's goalkeepers that just don't fit in that style of play, or they're going to have to learn, obviously. But it takes a lot of adjustment, particularly for old school goalkeepers, particularly for goalkeepers that have come up. And I'll give Guzan a lot of credit, because the era that Guzan began as a goalkeeper, and far before me, goalkeepers weren't sweeper keepers in that mentality. They weren't needing to use their feet to the same extent. They weren't expected to be able to deal or take on forwards. They weren't getting caught in those no man's land positions. And as much as I give Guzan a hard time, for a player of his age, I mean, he's 36, which, shows the generation of goalkeeper he came up with. It is a big adapting. It is a big difference. And I only worry somewhat when I think about this game is when the focus becomes so much on the goalkeeper's footwork, when the focus becomes so much on wanting a goalkeeper that is a quality field player, does that jeopardize the level of that goalkeeper's handling, of that goalkeeper's decision making from crosses? Are they working so much on footwork that then they kind of neglect other skills? And does that mean that the goalkeeper we're going to see 10, 15 years down the line, if football continues to develop into this sweeper play and the more aggressive goalkeeper higher up the pitch, does that mean we aren't going to see as many goalkeepers that are as technically sound when it comes to their handling other than just their distribution?
Yeah, it's a really interesting evolution, and not everybody does it. And we've seen goalkeepers. I totally agree with you. I mean, Brad Kazan has gotten so much more confident on the ball since he came to Atlanta, because I think he's probably been asked to do it more in his career here than he had ever done it. But you're going to see this more and more and more. And Zach Steffen is one that I point to, a guy that I did not think would fit in Manchester City's system of playing this way, and he's been fine. When he's had to play for the first team with Manchester City, no real issue, no real drop-off. He's looked good. He's looked confident. He's looked comfortable. You know, it's such a vital part of the game that I think it becomes, for those goalkeepers coming up, almost that dual track. And it's got to be dual, like you say, because if you do sacrifice crossing, if you do sacrifice shot stopping to work at your feet, you can't be a top goalkeeper either.
But the US is doing well with that. And that's the one difference I noticed coaching in the US versus in the UK. Here, it's frustrating to an extent, but they don't specialize very early on. They have a lot of players that will play, 30 minutes on the pitch and then go in goal for 30 minutes. And that's the most natural and organic way to develop the foot skills of a goalkeeper, is by having them play on the field, is by getting those real life touches in. So as much as a goalkeeper, it was hard to accept at first as a coach that I didn't have a specific delegated goalkeeper, or I had to split my goalkeepers 50-50. You would see the difference. You would see the confidence with their footwork, because they would come on and play in net after they had already warmed up their feet, per se.
Right. It's fascinating to see how this is evolving and continuing to evolve. I mean, you get somebody like Manuel Neuer, who is at a whole nother level of being a field player in goal. And you'll see more down the line, I think.
100%. That's the way the game's going. And like you say, Jason, as long as they're not neglecting the shot-stopping side of things, because the goalkeeper can't win. You're either going to criticize his feet or you're going to criticize their shot-stopping.
Does it change maybe where you think coaches and scouts are going to start looking not
I think
solely?
It already has.
You do? Because, I mean, you've talked about this before, like, you see coaches and scouts still, I think, look at, on the men's side, the 6'5", 6'4", 6'6", or 6'7" guy, and it's like, ooh, that's a goalkeeper. That's right there. Yeah, I'm good. That's going to be a great goalkeeper. And maybe they overlook somebody like a Nicky Raimondo, who is smaller and good with their feet. Do you think the smaller goalkeeper now is maybe coming into the fore?
I don't know about the height thing. I'm not a Raimondo height. I think maybe they're giving more 6-foot goalkeepers a chance and looking at them instead of the stature, because a lot of big goalkeepers are often not quite as good with their feet. It's an agility thing. It's a coordination thing, without stereotyping too heavily. So you might get that leeway a little bit, but the main way I see scouting changing, the main way I see is that there's a little bit more leeway when it comes to the technical side of things. Things don't have to be beautifully technical. Things don't necessarily have to be done the right way when it comes to shot stopping. As long as they can keep the ball out the back of the net, the main focus is going to be, do they fit in my style of play? Are they comfortable with the ball at their feet? And I would imagine that these scouts are looking more at the moments of consistent play in terms of the goalkeeper's positioning, in terms of whether they're asking for the ball back, rather than those 3-4 moments in a match where they're actually called on in terms of real action with shot stopping.
So we've talked a little bit about Atlanta United's goalkeeper group as a whole, and there's an expectation that Rocco Rios Novo will be joining the group here soon from Lanús on loan, and we think as the first or the third goalkeeper for the first team, probably will play with Atlanta United too. We'll see how that goes. But John Roper asked just about the reserve goalkeepers Because, I mean, Brad is 36, and you're going to see a time come where somebody will take over. Do you think that person might be with the club already, or do you feel comfortable if they're called upon right now?
Look, I hate to say it because I think Alec Khan has been patiently waiting in the wings, and he has been patient. But the hardest thing for a goalkeeper, particularly a reserve goalkeeper, is if you're not out on loan, if you are in that second choice position where you're on the bench, you're not getting minutes, you're not getting reps, you're not sharp. And actually, if I was Alec Khan, I'd want to be the third choice goalkeeper. I'd want to be that goalkeeper that's actually getting minutes for the twos. It's really interesting how sometimes the second choice goalkeeper can be punished in some ways in terms of their game time. As a professional football player, let's be honest, you want to play. So you're almost punished for being that step up that you're trusted as being on the bench, but you're not getting minutes. So I feel bad for Alec Khan. I think he's been patient. And when we've seen him play, when he's got those rare minutes, he's been decent. He's been solid. But I'm not sure if he's potentially wasting his prime years. He's 30 now. He's kind of wasting his prime years by sitting on the bench. So I'm surprised he hasn't been looked at by other teams. He hasn't asked or requested for a loan out. So Alec, I feel bad for, but I'm not sure his time will ever come back again after starting as the inaugural goalkeeper. We liked Lundgaard. We saw him do pretty well in the twos. But again, do you think that Atlanta United might invest in a higher level goalkeeper, a caliber goalkeeper, a goalkeeper that's already proved themselves, Jason?
I could see it going either way. I think you're going to see with Atlanta United in general, maybe even starting this season, but very, very soon, you're going to see them want to develop guys from within who understand the Atlanta United way. And I know there's narratives out there about, the identity was lost or there's no identity or whatever, which isn't true. I mean, I think you can go back and look at the lines from the teams. Did it come out in different ways with Tata Martino, Frank de Boer, and what we expect from Gabriel Heinze? Yeah, the pace of play was different. Some of the pressure was very different in terms of how high the pressure was, how high the defensive line was. Stuff like that vary because you have to base it off the coach's preference. You have to base it off the players you have, et cetera, et cetera. But the philosophy of the way you play, I think, has been consistent. And it's very consistent at the academy and with the two side of things because they're all coming up in the same way. I think goalkeepers are going to be part of that. I think they brought Ben Lundgaard here for a reason. I think they see him as a potential first-team goalkeeper, and that time with CONCACAF and training and preparing for that, I think was a big part of that. He's still young. He's,
and that's the thing
3
about
years in as a pro.
Age is so different. Your prime is at a different stage. You've got a longer career. But I also think it takes longer for you to blossom as a goalkeeper.
Yeah.
It takes longer. It takes more reps. It takes more maturity because a lot of goalkeeping is mental. And that's why I think the maturity level of a goalkeeper is important. And Atlanta United, too, has always had goalkeepers with experience under their belt. So, like you say, Jason, the twos is a great opportunity for Lundgaard to get experience. But the level is very different and the jump is pretty significant, and it's very rare that you see players transition smoothly from the twos all the way up to the first team. We've had a few, Bello's done great. We saw Conway come in right away with his goal, but it's a huge jump for goalkeepers in particular to make that jump without exposure into the first team as well.
Yeah, and there could be a kind of an onboarding period when that happens. But I think Lundgaard is somebody that they'll be keeping an eye on. I think Vicente Reyes is definitely a player they'll be keeping an eye on. Academy goalkeeper, Chilean youth international. And if you have a situation where your goalkeeper pool in 2021 includes a U.S. senior international in Gazan, I think Zach Steffen's the number one. I think he's definitely claimed that fully now. Beyond that, you can throw a bunch of different goalkeepers into the mix, and Brad Gazan should be part of that mix. Okay, then you have Lundgaard, you have Alec Can, different ages, different levels of development. I think secure goalkeepers that you can trust. But then you have two, if you bring in Novo on loan with an option to buy, and Reyes, who are youth internationals for South American nations. that have a lot of career in front of them and maybe are a little bit of that transition to the next step of a goalkeeper who is like a sweeper when you need it. Because I think in general, this team wants to play higher. They want to play a higher line, and you're going to need a goalkeeper who can do more of that.
And competition is key. We see a lot of starting goalkeepers, and I use Jordan Pickford as an example a lot with the England national team, Joe Hart even. There's a lot of goalkeepers that get very complacent in their starting position, that they think it's given. So I think it'll be a very good thing for Guzan, who potentially has had a few shaky moments. I know, I always say it, I'm a little bit harder on him than I probably should be at times, but it'll be good for him to see that there's players breathing down his neck, and he'll want to finish his career strong, and he'll want to finish it on his own terms, I'm sure. So you're only as good as the players you train with and the service you receive. So it'll benefit Guzan to have quality surrounding him.
Yeah, every team needs it. I mean, we see it with Liverpool this season, where you don't have as much competition for spots. Everybody is secure in their role, and you don't handle adversity as well. You just can't, because you're not being pressured internally by somebody trying to take your job. You need that to be at your best. Speaking of that, Patrick Delaney asks about players and combinations of players that you're excited to see grow under Gabriel Heinze here in Atlanta in 2021.
So it's tough because we don't really know how he's going to shape up yet in terms of personnel. But what I like about the team, I think there's such a huge mix between homegrown players and players that you've brought in with different caliber experience. You've got a player like Lopez that you brought in, who's, how old is he, 37, 38?
Yeah, going to be 38 when the season starts.
So you've got that mix. You've got a player that has experience that is 38 versus youngsters like Jackson Conway, who we've seen in the twos. We've seen with one game for the first team right at the end of the season. And I think it's going to be that mix between internationals and the different style of play that you might expect to come from those South American players versus some homegrown players that have been with the club for their whole senior career that are going to be able to play the style or the Atlanta way, in inverted commas. So I'm excited to see how that gels. It's a very small comparison, but in college we had American girls versus South American girls, European girls, and it was very interesting to see how that gelled together, and it took time. So I think we do need to be patient depending on the personnel that we include in our starting lineup, but I'm excited to see what these different pools of players can bring to the table, and the difference between that maturity and experience and that youthful, almost naive, but in a good way. I think naivety and that fearlessness can be really exciting from young players. So I'm excited to see how those two things can mesh.
Yeah, you can be molded. You know, I mean, young players will be willing to put in the work off the ball that the style of play is going to require. And they'll also, I think, be very receptive to a manager like Gabriel Heinze saying, I want it this way. I want you to do this. I want you to be in this position. I want you to be ready to, attack in this way. I think young players, and you're seeing outside of Lisandro Lopez, who's kind of a special situation, you're seeing a lot of players come in, I think, with big expectations who are, 18, 19, 20, 21, who are going to have the ability to impact how well this team does this year.
And when you think about that, and yes, we want success in the present. Yes, you want instant gratification. But when you've got these young players, what is exciting is about the future. What is exciting is about how long these players may potentially have to get to know each other, to play, and what it looks like 3-4 seasons down the line as well. Yeah,
it's going to be a lot of fun to watch this team develop. I'm looking at it like Tata Martino's 2 years in Atlanta, and reports were that Gabriel Heinze signed a 2-year deal. I think that's the kind of trajectory to expect. I think it's a safe expectation. It's going to be not up and down in a completely negative way, but you're going to have some learning lessons in 2021 as you adjust to playing in a more aggressive way. This is going to be a more risk-taking way than we saw under Frank de Boer, and when you take risks, sometimes you crash and burn. But I think they'll be a contender by the end of the season as they kind of learn everything and can absolutely make a playoff run. And then next year, they could be the best team in the league. And that was what we saw in 17 and 18. That's kind of what I'm expecting under Heinze in 21 and 22.
I think most fans would take that. particularly that more exciting style of play that we got treated to in the first 2 years. And that's what I'm looking forward to as well. Yes, I'm going to be pulling my hair out at times, I'm sure, about the issues we're going to have defensively and the risks we're going to take. But sometimes it's nice to sacrifice those moments for exciting, free-flowing play going forwards.
So you said exciting. How do you define exciting?
See, when I use exciting, I'm using it as a broader term for most fans, because there's appreciation and you can enjoy. I am, and I'm not blowing I can enjoy a 0-0 draw because I take pleasure in watching tight defensive performances. I think that's the goalkeeper in me. I enjoy displays like that. But for neutral fans, I think I look more at what a neutral would experience when I use the word exciting. Okay. Most neutral fans would want to watch goals, would want to watch going forward, attacking, taking risks. That is more fun to watch than parking the bus or slow build-up play out of the back. So what I'm hoping for is more of those, more direct to an extent and more fast-flowing instead of 24 lateral passes.
We'll see how this goes then. This is going to be interesting. They will definitely build up out of the back, and that's such a huge element here. Not intentionally slowly, and if it goes well, then you're out and you're forward and everything's good. I think the biggest change that you're going to see in 21 with Gabriel Heinze is instead of when you lose possession starting to drop, and that was what we saw under Frank de Boer, and honestly what we saw towards the end with Tata Martino as well, you're not going to see that. If anything, they're going to get even higher, and they're going to step up even higher when you lose possession, because it's going to be all about trying to keep the other team in their half as far away from your goal as possible.
That's scary to play against. No defending team wants to play against a high pressing line. It's terrifying. So, like you say, it can go both ways because you're going to be leaving a lot of space over the back. But if you get it right and you put these teams under pressure early, you can cause a lot of turnovers in dangerous areas.
And you got to bounce back when it doesn't go right, because it won't. I mean, you'll have mistakes that'll happen, and this team's got to be strong mentally when that happens. We've seen Leeds play in this way this year where they don't change. They play their game, and we saw it on the weekend against Arsenal. You had a goalkeeper mistake, you had a bad start, you were down 4-0, came back and got it to 4-2, and we're putting Arsenal under pressure. Fans were sweating a bit. You got to have that internal belief that mistakes happen. We're not going to change because we're playing the best way for us.
Do you think we'll be seeing not too many 0-0 draws then, Jason?
They'll happen at times, because I think one very underrated thing of Gabriel Heinze at Vélez is his teams were really, really good defensively. Really good defensively. And they didn't drop and defend deep. They defended very high up the pitch. But he nailed it with the groups that he had, and I think he's got the right materials to do that here. He's always going to want the ball. It's always going to be based around, I want the ball. And that's where the idea of, I think, patient possession play being negative maybe is unfair, because I think they will be patient to set up what they want. Not mindless, I guess is the best way to put it. Not without an idea of what they're doing. But they will make the passes to do what they want. Like, you'll see a lot of times they'll work on the right side. They'll knock the ball around on the right side. They'll work to stretch the field to the right, to pull the opponent to the right, because they're only trying to set up somebody on the left coming in to finish. Like, it's always setting up the guy on the backside that is free, that isn't being covered. So they might take extra passes to do that, to get the look they want.
But
I think
there's
that's where
a
you'll see
soccer IQ component to it. It has a purpose. And I think that's what the biggest importance is, that, and we're going to need personnel with that high soccer IQ as well to do that. So I think that's will be quite a big adjustment at times, to have that purpose and vision of the bigger picture. Why am I making these passes?
Purpose is a really good way to put it, because I think at times people felt like there wasn't a purpose to some of the possession in, I guess, maybe in the middle of 2019, because by the end it wasn't playing that way. In the middle you had a little bit of that. it was a little too slow to find the purpose, is the way that I felt like it came off in 2019, especially early on, and it got better as the year went on. I think that won't be the case here. I think that'll be very well explained from day one. Now, one thing Michael Ruiz asks about is a deal that was finally officially announced yesterday. Eric Remedi to San Jose, $200,000 in allocation money up front, potential for $500,000. Ruiz said that thinks that it needs to be $400,000 to make it worth it. Probably the incentives are easy to hit. What do you think about that deal in general with Remedi leaving, and include Franco Escobar going as well? And it looks like he's going to be injured and miss some time with Newell's Old Boys, but two stalwarts of Atlanta United who are not going to be here in 2021.
I think we'll miss Franco more than we miss Remedi. Look, I was so disappointed with the Remedi we saw last season at times, because there were so many moments of talent that he had with Atlanta United throughout his career with us. But last season, there just seemed to be something missing. And I look back and I think about my main criticisms of him, and it was he never had at times this perception of what was around him. He always seemed to be turning into trouble. It was like he didn't check his shoulder whenever he had possession, and it caused a lot of turnovers. So I think that at times, and at first when I read the announcement that he was going, I was disappointed because I was remembering potentially a Remedi of the season before. Last season, I think he left a lot to be desired, so I don't think it's a bad deal. I think that we're going to find a replacement for him, and it won't be as a significant miss as someone like Franco Escobar, who, again, had his hot-headed moments, picked up a lot of yellow cards, as we like to tweet about, as that being the one stable thing of last season, but had so much heart, had so much spirit, and did become a leader and a nitty-gritty player, that sort of smash and the smash that you needed at times to lift the team. So I think that will be more missed than Eric Remedi, and I think San Jose's got a good deal out of him, but I don't think Atlanta United will feel hard done by either with that deal.
Yeah, I think he fits San Jose's system, and I don't know if he's a 100% starter in San Jose, but he'll get plenty of playing time, and Matias Almeida knows what he brings to the table. He fits the way Almeida wants to play, which is even more aggressive once you lose possession than Atlanta United will be, in my opinion, under Gabriel Heinze. It'll be much more like immediately grab the man closest to you, even more risk-taking. Remedi on the ball was maybe the issue that we saw come to the fore later in 2019 and especially in 2020. There were a lot of giveaways in bad spots, and you're not going to be able to do that in the system. You're getting younger in those spots. Sosa and...
I was going to say, there were moments he looked deconditioned to me.
Yeah, maybe coming back from the break, and that was different for so many different guys. Like, some people, I think, really struggled all over the world with that long layoff and then coming back to play.
We all gained a few pounds, didn't we, Jason, over quarantine?
Yeah, I did. A lot of people did, and this is tough to get back into that rhythm. And I think for Eric Remedi, it was a challenge. So you get a chance to go get Santiago Sosa, and we expect Franco Ibarra. You're getting younger. You're getting, again, players who are maybe a little more understanding of what Gabriel Heinze is going to want, and maybe fit that, all right, if the coach tells me to run through the wall 5 times, I'm going to run through the wall 5 times. You need that.
100%. And a lot of the time when you get a new coach and you see people from the old regime let go, and I think that's what's happening here. We're seeing players let go, fan favorites let go, and I understand, and we all feel sad to see some of our favorites leave, but there's a purpose. Again, the word purpose, there's a reason why this is happening, and I'm sure by the end of the season we'll see that and understand that these were the right decisions to make with personnel.
Yeah, it's just part of the gig. You're going to see turnover at times. One question that I don't think we're going to be able to dig too deep into, but I want to ask you about one of your gigs. Joey Logan asked about Georgia College preview. He knows that some schools have started already. I know Georgia State did their season in the Sun Belt in the fall on the men and on the women's side. Georgia Southern as well. Clayton State is active right now, and you're calling those games. Oglethorpe, who we've called, will be playing a short schedule. I think it's about 6 games in March at the D3 level. What does Clayton State look like? How has it just been for you to be back seeing live games again after a little while.
Well, Jason, I'm not seeing as many live games as I would like, and that's what's so hard about these times for college players at college level, particularly, I think, in the lower divisions where there's not necessarily as much funding. The COVID protocols seem pretty strict, which is important, obviously, but we're seeing so many postponements. What happened in the Peach Belt Conference, the Division 2 that Clayton State plays in, is they're doing conference only to reduce travel and exposure and make sure everyone's playing the same teams in a smaller locality. But there are COVID protocols, and all the games were scheduled to be done by the middle of March, but we've already had 2 games postponed and we're 3 games in. So it's very tough for these players because they can't get that rhythm. And so the matches I've watched so far have been a little disjointed. They've been a little bit slower than you might expect. But I'm not going to lie, Jason, I wouldn't have minded playing in the winter compared to coming from England and playing in August in Georgia. So I think some of the European players might be enjoying the weather a little better. But look, it's brilliant that the Peach Belt Conference has been able to host a season of some sort, particularly for those seniors who this is their last opportunity. But to answer Logan's question, it's not going to be the same as what we're used to seeing, and hopefully come August we'll be able to see more of the college season that we're used to. And a lot of these teams probably using this season as a preparation, a real preseason that they're not usually getting in the spring to prepare for the fall. So Oglethorpe, Clayton State, they'll be ready come August and probably sharper and more ready because they'll know their personnel that they have.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing Georgia State in the fall. Haven't had a chance to call the semifinals of the Sun Belt on the men's side. They've got a lot of young talent that I thought played well in that semifinal against Coastal Carolina, and some guys that I expect to take a jump next season and be in bigger roles because they are going to be losing a few players. Their women's program is also growing as well, with a number of players coming in from international programs, coming in from other countries and elevating the women's side. Georgia State's going to be one to watch at the D1 level, and I hope that we see that kind of growth, down south in Statesboro with Georgia Southern as well. Their men's program has been up and down. I hope that they get back to where they're competing in the Sun Belt, competing for titles. And you have Chris Adams moving from North Georgia on the women's side down to Statesboro, and I know Chris, I think he got the North Georgia program started. So for him to jump from that level to D1 and go to Statesboro and try to build up the Georgia Southern program, there's a lot of college programs in the state that I think are in the process of being elevated. It's going to be a fun watch over the next year or two.
And a lot of that comes from the club level too. When you look at Georgia clubs and the level we have here, the recruiting pools are so strong, and that's what makes it exciting. You mentioned UNG, fantastic. You've got a lot of D2, D3 smaller schools with a lot of quality. So if you once, it's safe to do so, anyone looking for their fix of in-person soccer for college level is definitely one that you can be treated to some great action at as well. Yeah,
just the time that I've been calling games, the level has improved over the last 2-3 years in a really big way. And I think it's going to take an even bigger jump because the players are coming in as better players day one. So the level's just better from the jump.
100%.
Can't wait to see the return of normal college soccer in the fall. Really looking forward to the SheBelieves Cup as well. Next week, we'll probably get really deep into SheBelieves Cup, what we've learned a couple games in from all the teams involved. We'll always take your questions as well. So we record on Tuesdays. You'll be looking for this on Tuesday evenings. Make sure you're subscribed to Soccer Down Here on all your podcatcher programs. But looking forward to SheBelieves and really jumping into these 4 teams next week and seeing if we've learned more about the U.S., but also seeing if we've learned about Argentina, Brazil, and Canada too.
Can't wait, Jason, and we'll be back next Tuesday.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being part of it. Make sure you're following at Jess Talks Footy with an IE. I'm at Longshoe. Follow Soccer Down Here as well for all the latest from the network. We'll be back with you next week.